Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. How are you all? This is Mr. Muhammad with you for yet again a new class today. So this is the second class of today's let's say second class for today. So please, I would like you to focus on this lesson a lot, because every year you will get questions related to this topic in maybe 2 or 3 questions. So please be careful, try to understand the concept clearly. Okay, so as you can see, the unit is quadratics. Please go through the mission and vision of our school, and the value of the week is about respecting your family members and your friends. Okay, so what are the objectives of today's lesson? It's about how do we solve problems related to quadratic graphs. Okay, so a quadratic graph is generally, you also need to write down the keywords as well: quadratic graphs, parabola, turning point, maximum and minimum points. So yeah, that's it. So let's start now from here. Actually, this is a same copy from your book itself, but it has very important information, this particular page. So please mark everything that you have in this particular unit, let's say. So quadratic graphs are generally the graphs that are formed from a quadratic equation or quadratic expression. So we have learned that a quadratic expression is generally in the form of ax square plus bx plus c. Okay, and the graph of y equals to fx, or the graph of a quadratic graph, is generally a curved shape called a parabola. So this is something that you have already learned when you were studying for IGs, so I'll not stress more on this, but I would like to just remind you about how the shape of a quadratic graph looks like. If the coefficient a is positive, the parabola will have the shape of this, and the coefficient a is negative, then the parabola will have the shape of this. Okay, so it's a U shape for when a is positive, and it's let's say the upside down of U shape when a is negative. Okay, very important points. These are very important points. The graph crosses the y-axis when x equal to 0. Okay, then the y coordinate will be equal to c. Very important, you will need this. The graph crosses y-axis when it crosses the y-axis over here when x equals to 0. Okay, so when you are going to, especially we are in this particular lesson, we are going to learn how to sketch graphs. So in order to sketch graph, we need to know where does the graph or where does the curve cut the x and y axis, and also we need to know the minimum points as well, minimum or maximum points. Okay, so the first point is the graph crosses the y axis when x equals to 0. So definitely, if we have to find out where the graph crosses the y-axis, we need to put x equal to 0 and we need to find the value. Second point, the graph crosses the x-axis when y equals to 0. That means if you have a quadratic expression, you will just factorize it and you will get two values of x. Those two values of x will be these 2 points. Okay, so let's say you are having a quadratic expression, let's say x square minus 5x plus 6. Okay, so if you equal to 0, for example, because when it crosses the x-axis, y equals to 0, right? So if we solve this, we get x minus 3 and x minus 2 equal to 0. That means from here we can write x equals to 3 and x equals to 2. So that means the point where this graph will cut the x-axis, so the point where this graph will cut the x-axis will be 2 and 3, because you got the values of x to be 2 and 3, right? So 2 and 3. Now every quadratic graph will have one turning point. Now what is turning point? Turning points are points where, let's say this number 3 over here that you can see, the point where let's say here this graph is moving, and at this point it is turning to the other side, correct? So the point 3 over here and the point 3 over here, these are generally, we call it as turning points. Okay, so you also, when you are going to sketch a graph, you also need to find one turning point, yani the coordinates of the turning point. So how can you do that? This point over here is really important. In order to find out the coordinates of the turning point, what you need to do is you have to express the quadratic expression that you have in the form of completing the square. We learned last 2 classes, we just were focusing on what? On completing the square. Now we are going to get the benefits of understanding the method of completing the square. Okay, so let's say if you are expressing a quadratic expression like this in the form of this format, completing the square format. So the turning point will be, look at here, it is P, the turning point will be minus P. Okay, and this is Q, the turning point, the Y coordinate will be Q, and if it is plus P, the X coordinate of the turning point will be minus P. If it is minus P, the X coordinate of the turning point will be P. So I'll just give you an example before we move on to problems. I'll just give you an example of completing the square. Let's say you have turned an quadratic expression like this in the form of completing the square. Let's say you found y equals to x minus 5 by 2 whole square. Okay, I'm not converting this, I'm not doing the math, I'm just giving you a random number. Let's say you have solved and you got in the form of completing the square as 7. Okay, so let's say you got this expression y equals to x minus 5 by 2 whole square plus 7. So from here the coordinates of the turning point according to this formula will be 5 by 2, because you have here plus, you put minus, here you have minus, so the coordinate of the turning point will be 5 by 2 comma, what do you have for Q? Here it was plus Q, so here it is also plus 7, so the coordinate of the Y coordinate will be 7 and the coordinate of the X coordinate will be 5 by 2. So that means this particular turning point will have the coordinate of 5 by 2 and 7. So in order to, as a whole, if you have to sketch a quadratic graph, you need to find out 4 points. So what are those 4 points? You need to find out the point where the graph cuts the y-axis. You need to find out the point where the graph cuts the x-axis, and then you need to also find out the minimum point, or in this case you need to find out the maximum point. It's the same procedure. To find out the minimum point and the maximum point. Try to convert, first you have to convert in the completing the square format, and from here you will take this and use it to determine the x coordinate and y coordinate of the turning point. Other points are easy. You put y equal to 0, you get the values of x. You put x equal to 0, you get the values of y. Okay, so once you have all the 4 values, you can easily sketch the quadratic graph. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Let's move on to one problem now. So you have sketch the graph of y equals to x square minus 5x plus 4 and find the coordinates of its turning point. So let's first figure out the values of x. Okay, so to find out the values of x, we put y equals to 0. Okay, so we can write x square minus 5x plus 4 is equal to 0. So now I believe that you already know how to solve a factorize a quadratic expression. So that means you will get x minus 1 and x minus 4 is equal to 0. So you will get the values of x to be 1 and x to be 4. So khalas. So I am done with the values of x. Finished. Next, the step is to find out the value of y when x equal to 0. That means where the point will cut the y-axis. So at y-axis, so just over here we can write at x-axis y equal to 0, and again at y-axis x equal to 0. So we can put the value over here, y equals 0 square minus 0, because 5 into 0 is 0, then plus 4. So y equal to 4. That means the point where it will cut the y-axis is 4, 0. I mean 0, 4. Okay. So we got the coordinate, this value as well. Next we need to find out the turning points. Okay. So how to find out the coordinates of the turning points? First we have y equals to x square minus 5x plus 4. Correct? So you use the completing the square formula which we learned, ax minus b by 2a whole square plus c minus b square by 4a. So if we apply this formula, a is 1, so we write 1 equals to 1 into x minus it is plus actually. So now since b is minus, so I will write minus 5 by 2 into a is 1, so 5 by 2 square plus c is 4 minus b square is minus 5 square is 25, okay, over 4a. A is 1, so 4 times 1 is 4. So finally we write 1 into anything is 1, so we keep it as x minus 5 by 2 whole square plus 4 minus 4 4 is 16, 16 minus 25 is minus 9, so we put it as minus 9 over 4. So if we look at the formula, if it is x plus p whole square plus q, we put the opposite sign for p and the same sign for q. So opposite sign of minus 5 by 2, so we can write coordinates of turning point is how much? 5 by 2, because we have to put the opposite sign. This is p, this will be p and this will be q. So and the same sign for q, so that is minus 9 by 4. Okay, so we got the coordinates of the turning point, we got where the x, the graph will cut the y-axis, and we got the points where it will cut the x-axis. Now it's time for drawing the graph. So we got the coordinates, these are the coordinates. Okay, so 4 0 4, right? So this point over here, this is y-axis, so this is 4. Then we got 1 and 4, so 1 and 4. Okay, then where is the minimum point? 5 by 2 minus 9 by 4. So this is how your graph should look like. The sketch of the graph should be this. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So just to remind you, there is another way of finding out the minimum point, but since you have learned how to do the completing the square, so I would suggest that you follow this method. It's easy, but also you can do the same thing over here. If you find the values of x, two values of x, 1 and 4, right? So just find the midpoint of x, which is 2.5, and for 2.5 place the value of x over here and you will find the value of y. Now this particular solution does not work every time, because in some graphs, like the next question, in the next question you will find that the values, there are no proper values of x. Okay, so in that case it's difficult to find out the minimum points. So rather use the completing the square. It's easier for all the all different problems you can use, and you will use completing the square anyhow you have to learn this method. There's no alternative. So it's better that you follow completing the square and then use the whatever you get over here and simplify this, and you use P and Q to find out the coordinates of the turning point. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Let's look at one more question now. So the next question is a bit more complicated, but it's easy. Now sketch the graph of y equals to 4x minus 2x square minus 3. Now the expression is given in such a way that you have to first rearrange it in the form of ax square plus bx plus c. So the first term should be x square, correct? So if we rearrange this, we get minus 2x square, then the x term, so plus 4x minus 3. So you have to rearrange it. I've done rearranging it, correct? So since you see that the coefficient of x square is a, generally we know that the coefficient of x square is a, and since it is negative, that means the shape of parabola will be like this, not like the U shape that we had. Okay, class. So we have understood now that it will have a like opposite U shaped. The next step that we need to find out is like the x coordinates, correct? So you have minus 2x square plus 4x minus 3 is equal to 0, because we know that on x axis y equal to 0. So if we use the quadratic formula and solve this, we get x equals to minus 4 plus root over minus something. Now if you put this in your calculator, you will get math error. So if you get math error, that means there are no real solutions of x. And what does that mean? That means this graph that you will get, it will not cut the x-axis. It will just go like this. It will not cut the x-axis. Understood? If you get values of x like math error after putting, let's say, using the quadratic formula, you know that minus b plus minus root over b square minus 4ac by 2a. You have learned the quadratic formula already. So if we use the quadratic formula, you just put it in your calculator, you will see that you will get a square root of negative number. So whenever you put a square root of negative number, you will never get a real value. Okay, so in that case you have to understand that the graph will not cut the x-axis. So if the graph does not cut the x-axis, it will look like this. So in this case, we have to also check if this graph cuts the y-axis or no. So we understood that it does not cut the x-axis. Fine. So but now we need to find out whether it cuts the y-axis or no. So for y-axis, we know that we have to put x equal to 0, right? So if x equal to 0, y will be equal to how much? Minus 3, because 4 into 0, 0, minus 2 into 0, 0, then you get minus 3. So that means you can write at x equal to 0, y equal to minus 3. So that means it will cut over here at minus 3. So that's confirmed. Okay, now we got the x values. That means we have found that there is no real x value. That means it will not cut the x-axis, but it will definitely cut the y-axis at minus 3. Okay, so we have learned how the shape would be. We have learned where it will cut the y-axis, and we have also learned that it will not cut the x-axis. Now what remains is the maximum point. So again, for maximum point, what we need to do is use the completing the square formula. So for completing the square formula, as you can see, they have done over here, but you can also apply the one that we learned till now, x plus b by 2a whole square plus c minus b square by 4a. So if we apply this, a is minus 2, so we put minus 2 into x plus what is b? B is 4. So 4 divided by 2a, that means it becomes minus, so minus 2, okay, by 2a, 2 2s are 4. So b is 4, so 4, let me write it again, minus 2 times x minus 4 over 4, because b is 4 and 2a means 2 into minus 2. So this minus, it becomes minus over here, square, okay, plus c minus, c is minus 3 minus b square is 16 over 4a. 4 into minus 2 is minus 8. Okay, so if we simplify this, you get how much? Minus 2 into, so I'll put a minus 2 over here, x minus 1 whole square, 4 by 4 is 1, then minus 3 plus 2, because 16 by 8 is 2, then minus and minus becomes plus. If you put it in your calculator, it becomes much more easier. So minus 3 plus 2 is minus 1. So this is how your completing the square looks like. So now we also know that P, this is P and this is Q, but P you have to change the sign. So the P coordinate of P is 1 and the coordinate of Q is minus 1. So now we got the maximum point as well. So the maximum point is 1 and minus 1. So time to sketch the graph. Okay, I will sketch the graph for you. So if you draw the axis first, I'll draw the axis. So this is x-axis, this is y-axis. Okay, next, see, we know that the shape will be like this. So let me draw it a bit further. Sorry, this is y and this is x, my mistake. Okay, so we know that the shape will go like this. Okay, so we know that this is minus 3. We know that it will not cut the x-axis, so we don't need the values of x. So we just need the values of the maximum points. So the values of maximum point is 1 and minus 1. That's it for your sketching. Okay, so this is how you can solve any problem related to sketching the graph for quadratic graphs. Okay, so I hope this is clear. If you have any question, please try to ask me any question if you have, and please do go through this video for better understanding. Remember that for sketching a graph, it does not need to be plotted exactly or drawn to scale. The way I've drawn, I've just shown you how to draw. Draw a smooth curve by hand. Identify any relevant key points such as intercepts and turning points and label your axis. Remember these 3 points when you are sketching a graph. Okay, so I am going to solve one more problem before we finish. So here it's actually the opposite way. You have been given the minimum point and it also has been given that it passes through 4 0. Okay, it passes through 4 0. So what you need to do is find the values of a, b and c. That means before you were given the quadratic expression, but you had to find out the minimum points. Okay, and then you would sketch the graph. So now it's like the minimum point is given, but you need to find out the values of a, b and c. Now we know that any quadratic expression can be written in the form of y equals to, if we ax plus p whole square plus q, right? This is from the first page. Any quadratic expression can be written as a into x plus p whole square plus q by completing the square format, correct? And from here we know that the turning points are minus p and q. Okay, so if you look at the minimum points, they are already given 5 and minus 3. That means P is 5 and Q is minus 3, correct? But if you look at this carefully, if here it is minus, here it is plus. Okay, so here in this case the minimum point is positive. That means over here if I put it, I should put a negative sign. That means minus 5. And Q the same sign. Q is over here is positive, here also it is positive, so I will write minus 3. Understood? So we got the values of P and Q. Okay, so here there is one more point given, it passes through 4 0. So what is the meaning of that it passes through 4 0? That means when x coordinate is 4, the y coordinate will be 0. So just place these values, x coordinate is 4 and y coordinate 0 in this equation. So y is how much? 0, correct? So we can write 0 is equal to a into x minus 5 whole square. Sorry, x is how much? X is 4. So I am placing 4. So 0 equals to a, instead of x I am placing 4 minus 5 whole square minus 3. Can you tell me why am I doing this? I am doing this so that I can get the value of a. Okay, so 0 is equal to a into minus 1 whole square minus 3. So a into 1 is 1. So 1, so we get 0 equal to a minus 3. So that means a equals to 3. Okay, so I got a equals to 3. Okay, fine. Now what I need to do is find out the value of B and C. Okay, so how can I find out the value of B and C? So instead of let's say so we have this equation now. If we place this value over here, so what do we get now? So let's say y equal to 3, we got the value of a to be 3, correct? And p, I am writing x minus 5 whole square minus 3. Okay, now if we simplify this, what can we write? Y equals to 3, x minus 5 whole square means a square minus 2ab plus b square. We will apply that. 2 into 5 into x, which is 10x, and plus 5 square 25 minus 3. So y equals to 3 into, sorry, I multiply now, 3x square. 3 into 10 is minus 30x. 3 into 25 is plus 75 minus 3. So if we simplify this again, y equals to 3x square minus 30x plus 72. So now we have created a quadratic expression, and now if we compare this equation, this expression with this expression, what do we get? This is a, this is b, and this is c. So that means a equals to 3, b equals to minus 30, and c equals 72. Okay, simple. So if you are given the opposite way, you have to first look at the minimum point and compare it with this equation, the completing the square equation. Place the values of the turning points as I have placed, find out the value of a. So once you get the value of a, just use it again in this equation. So y equal to 3 into x minus 5 whole square minus 3, simplify it, you will get a, b and c. Okay, so this is like the questions that you get like in EP form. These are generally the questions, same format you will get it in exam as well. Okay, so I hope you have understood this lesson, and I have given some homeworks. Please do it from your book, and thank you very much.